Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the All49ers Roundtable. I'm joined by Maverick, Pallack, Tony Farmer, and Jack Hammer. Today we got like 14 topics. They're all about the 49ers. We're going to get right into it. Hang around with us for the next hour or so. We'll keep you entertained. First question we got. The Niners were in the NFC Championship last year against the Packers. Destroyed them. Well, a year later, the Packers made it back. The Niners didn't. The Niners had a bunch of injuries this year. If the Niners can have a similar level of health that they had in 2019, and they weren't that healthy in 2019, will they be the NFC favorites next season? Who wants to go first?
Go ahead, Matt.
I can start off. I think the Packers, as of right now, will be the favorite for next season, regardless of how this week and if they win this week, how the Super Bowl plays out, just because they do have Aaron Rodgers, they do have their head coach in place, and they do have Davante Adams, who's, in my opinion, been the best receiver in the NFL when he was on the field this season. I think the Niners have a few matchup problems with the Packers. I know they matched up well in 2019, but without that safety that can defend the MVS deep ball or the Allen Lazard deep ball, that I think does hurt the 49ers. They need to find that safety to complement Jimmy Ward's box tackling ability, and they need to find a pass rush that will help Nick Bosa, because I know the pass rush was probably, in addition to the running game, the biggest part about facing the Packers. But without DeForest Buckner, without a 9-sack Eric Armstead, and without K'Wan Williams blitzing out of the slot, that hurts the Niners against the Packers. I do think they have pieces to be able to get there, but as of now, I'd say Packers.
I think this question is going to be a lot easier to answer in a couple months when we see what the 49ers do in the draft, how they address free agency, etc. As of right now, I don't think we can say the 49ers are going to be the favorites. Will they be among a handful of favorites who have a shot? Sure, but it's way, way too premature to say they're going to be the favorite in the NFC, or that they can go toe-to-toe with the Packers regardless of health.
Yeah, I don't think the 49ers are going to necessarily be the favorites. They're definitely going to be contenders. They showed this year, even with all the injuries, that they weren't that far off of being a playoff team. So I think they're going to have a really good chance of getting themselves into the playoffs and really, possibly winning the NFC West, depending on what happens up in Seattle. So as far as being NFC favorites, no, but contenders definitely.
I mean, the way I look at this team, this 2020 team, is even though all the bad things that happened, Mike McGlinchey being a joke, Eric Armstead kind of sleepwalking through the season, all the things that went poorly for them, if Jimmy G had just stayed healthy and played like he did in 2019, they might be there in the NFC Championship right now. I mean, I think the NFC is wide open. Maybe the Niners wouldn't have made it back this year, but if they could just get 16 games out of a starting quarterback who's decent, I think they could make it back. I mean, look, Drew Brees is going to retire. The Saints may not be a contender next year. Tampa's going to be around. Green Bay, they're great now, but Aaron Rodgers' contract, he's going to take up 20.6% of the cap next year. They got to renegotiate that. I don't know what's going to happen there. Green Bay might not be the power next year that they are right now. If the Niners could just work it out at quarterback, I do think they'd be right back there. And I think you could argue if they had Tom Brady or 16 games of Jimmy Garoppolo, they'd be there right now. So, yeah, things are looking up as long as they can figure out that one position.
Yeah, the one thing about Tampa, too, I think Shaq Barrett's a free agent, and Chris Godwin, I believe, is also a free agent. And then I think they have to lock up Gronk if that's a route they want to go, and Fournette. So a lot of their big pieces, yeah.
It's wide open. All right, let's move on to a wild card topic. Is Frank Gore a first ballot Hall of Famer? I mean, I don't think you'd ever say he was the best running back in the league at any point. But, man, what a career he's had, and he's still playing, technically, sort of. What do you say, Jack?
Yeah, I definitely think he's a first ballot Hall of Famer. He's been a top level running back almost throughout his whole career. Came in and people didn't really expect a whole lot out of him, and he just excelled from the very get go. And he's still playing at a high level now with his kid in college. So definitely somebody that I think should be a first ballot Hall of Famer. Definitely.
I think he deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer, no doubt. Will he? I'm not sure, because I think it's going to depend on when he officially retires, right? Is he going to do the whole Jerry Rice thing where he goes into camp next year and tries to make a team and then doesn't and then retires at that point? Because don't forget, who's retiring this year? Who will he be competing with on that first ballot? Likely Drew Brees, even though I don't think that's official, right? Phillip Rivers, which is official. Who knows? Maybe even an outside chance Tom Brady retires if he wins the Super Bowl.
Maybe Adrian Peterson.
Yeah, absolutely. He'd be going up against all these guys. And then don't forget, last year, there were some really good guys who didn't make it, who were finalists last year, guys like Torrey Holt, Isaac Bruce, etc. So I think the timing of when he retires is going to dictate it. But of course, he certainly deserves to be a first ballot Hall of Famer. I think a comparable for him would be a guy like Edgerrin James, who was a finalist last year. In my opinion, Frank Gore had a better career than Edgerrin James, and Edgerrin James just missed it by a hair because he was a finalist last time around.
Yeah, Grant, you took my example, Adrian Peterson. If they exit the same year, I think that hurts Frank Gore just because Adrian Peterson was a flashy name, and Frank Gore, although especially in the Bay Area, we're familiar with what he did, he wasn't a flashy guy. He was never the number one running back in the NFL because he competed with LaDainian Tomlinson at the first half of his career, Adrian Peterson and Chris Johnson for the middle part. That there's big names in that scenario. But Frank Gore will make the Hall of Fame. It's just first ballot might be hard. Pro Football Reference has his Hall of Fame monitor at 100.05, and their average is 106.99. I still think he makes it just because of how important he was and his longevity. I think that's really impressive in the NFL, just being a running back and being able to play as long as he did. And he's been solid for 85% of his career. Maybe the last couple of years have been a little shaky, but that's to be expected. I think he's still a Hall of Fame worthy running back.
Yeah, it's interesting to compare him to a guy like Patrick Willis. Like when Patrick Willis was in the league, he was the best inside linebacker like almost every year. But he only played, 7 years? He didn't have the longevity. And Frank Gore did. He was never the best running back in the league, but he's still in the league. And his career stacks up with Emmitt Smith's. And I think actually, if I were a Hall of Fame voter, I would put more weight into the longevity than being the best for half a decade. Because, I mean, it's great to be the best for half a decade, but what you're trying to achieve is long-term greatness. Frank Gore did that. That being said, I don't think he'll be a first ballot Hall of Famer, whether or not he deserves to be one. I think he'll probably go in on the second or third ballot because he played on the West Coast, because he wasn't Adrian Peterson and he wasn't ever the top guy. But he'll make it, I would say, no later than the third ballot. And that's okay. Let's move on. One more Gore question. What's your favorite Frank Gore moment, considering his career may be over?
I think the loudest I ever yelled and was happy when Frank Gore had the ball was that cross-field Kaepernick throw. That was to Frank Gore on the other side of the field, correct, at Levi's. Mm-hmm. That play and then that Seattle game at Candlestick where he had the two long runs, those were my two favorite Frank Gore moments.
Yeah, I think ironically for me, I hate to bring this up, guys, but the most memorable Frank Gore moment would be a moment that didn't happen would be him not getting the ball against the Ravens in the Super Bowl when they were at the goal line and we kept throwing fades to Michael Crabtree. That's memorable. Of course, not a happy moment. I'd have to say kind of underrated moments would be that game against the Saints, the catch two where Vernon Davis had the big catch and Alex Smith had the naked bootleg that everybody talks about. Gore had some big timely runs in that game, picking up some key first downs throughout the game. And I think nobody recognizes that because of the other two standout plays in that game.
I'm going to go with the NFC Championship game at the end of the 2012 season. His two touchdowns late in the game to basically put the 49ers ahead. I think there was one in the third quarter, another one in the fourth quarter. Those would be my two, stud guy that we had a couple of great moments to get us into the championship game.
You're talking about in Atlanta, right?
Correct.
Yeah, I was at that game, and I was going to go with the Atlanta game too, not during the game, but after it. His press conference after the Atlanta game, it was my second season covering the team. I'd been around Frank Gore for 2 full seasons, and he was one of the veteran leaders on the team. I think he was probably 28, maybe 30 at the time. Him, Justin Smith, Patrick Willis kind of set the tone of the team, and their whole attitude every day was, I don't want to talk to the media. We're a bunch of tough guys who don't want fame. Like, leave us alone and let us play football. And it was cool. It was the attitude of the team. When Frank Gore would talk to us midweek, he would talk real quiet. He wouldn't make eye contact. He would make it look like, this isn't what I want to do. I'm a player. And after that game, he used to have this scowl on his face. It was cool. It was like a boxer. He was like 8 years old. He was so happy. He answered every question. He brought, I think, Colin Kaepernick up on the podium as well. I'd never seen Frank Gore be so happy and so vulnerable and so open. And you can see like it was the best day of his life. and he was assuming that he was going to go on and win the Super Bowl, and he didn't realize that that was actually the pinnacle of his career in terms of team. That was it that day. He wasn't going to get any closer, and I don't think he probably ever had more joy in the NFL than that day. And I was 10 feet away from him. I remember thinking, wow, this is a Frank Gore I've never met, and good for him. So I would always remember that.
The other
also, Justin Smith came out right after him, and Justin Smith was just as happy, just as talkative. I was like, I've never heard you say a word before. It was really interesting to see grown men be that like joyous, like they're like at a birthday party. It was great. Anyway, what were you saying?
The other Frank Gore moment I remember is so the last game at Candlestick, I think he had the rushing touchdown before the Bowman pick, and I wanted Gore to be the last touchdown at Candlestick because I thought that was a really fitting moment. Is like the 49er legend would be the last score, and then Atlanta's driving down and is possibly going to win the game and spoil the history of Candlestick or the finale there. And then Bowman got it, and I thought that was a nice consolation prize to Frank Gore getting the last touchdown. But I remember thinking that in the crowd being like, Frank Gore should get this last touchdown. He deserves it.
Absolutely. All right. Well, I hope Frank Gore has one more season in him. It's a cool story, and it'd be nice if he ended his career as the all-time leading rusher in the NFL. He'd be pretty cool. All right, let's get back to the Niners. What are the Niners' top 3 positions of need? I think we probably can all agree on what they are, so let's rank them. I think our rankings might be different. 1, 2, 3.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and start us off. I'm going to say the 49ers' biggest need is going to be defensive end. I think that's really going to be the number 1 spot to look at in the draft this year. Follow that up with somebody on the interior offensive line or quarterback, and almost put those 2 together, and cornerback. That's 4 really, but let's go defensive end, quarterback, and interior offensive line.
Good list.
I'm going to put cornerback number 1 just because the contract situation, like it's kind of intimidating looking at the roster and being like, wow, those are some bare cupboards. Like we don't have anybody at a really crucial position right now. I know we got some exclusive rights free agents who we're assuming are coming back, but beyond them, there's nobody there, and that's kind of scary. So I'd go that with number 1. Defensive end, I guess let's assume there's going to be no D Ford. I'm going to put that 3rd. Interior offensive line is going to be 2nd. It'd be really nice to get a young, durable player at center, considering what we've seen the last 2 years from that position with Richburg and Garland getting hurt.
Cool.
I'm going interior O-line first. I think one depends on how they see Daniel Brunskill's future. If they think he's a center, then right guard is the position they need. If they see him as a right guard, then center is. If they see him as a swing tackle, then they need both. So that's why I think that's number 1. And then cornerback, for the same thing Tony was saying, is there's not a lot of guys like expected to be back. If they can get Jason Verrett back, that helps, and they have more versatility with what they can do. But if they lose Verrett and they just have Emmanuel Mosley, then I think corner has to be one of the first 2 picks. And then edge rusher is my 3rd, because outside of Bosa, I'm not really comfortable with anyone there. Kerry Hyder was cheap, and that was very good, but he's not going to be cheap anymore, so they need an inexpensive edge rusher, I think, to be a complement to Bosa.
All right, good answer. This is interesting because we're all disagreeing here. I think the number 1 need is offensive line. And I'm not going to say interior, exterior. To me, do the Niners need a tackle? Yes. Do they need a guard? Do they need a guard? Yes. Do they need a center? Yes. Do they need a good offensive lineman somewhere on that line other than Trent Williams? Hell yes. Doesn't really matter what position. If they can get a stud, like they passed on Tristan Wirfs last year because they didn't need a tackle. Yes, you did. Any position, if he's good, get him, because you could get the next Joe Burrow, and look what happened to Joe Burrow this year. If you don't have the offensive line, you're kind of setting the kid up to fail. So to me, offensive line number 1, and then so much comes down to Jason Verrett. If they re-sign Jason Verrett, corner is not this number 2 need because he's fantastic, and Mosley's decent. If they don't get Verrett, then corner is right there next to offensive line. It's almost like 1A and 1B. After that, quarterback is a very big need, even though they have a serviceable guy. The problem is he can't stay healthy. And if he misses another half a season, 3/4 of a season, the Niners are screwed. So they got to have at least a fallback plan from Jimmy Garoppolo. And then the defensive end position, I would put it down lower. I would disagree with you guys on that. I mean, sure, they could use a replacement for D Ford, but Nick Bosa is coming back theoretically. He's a first-round pick. Eric Armstead, first-round pick, really expensive. Javon Kinlaw, first-round pick. They're highly invested. on that defensive line. Plus, they're paying $1 million a year for that defensive line coach who's supposed to be able to get stuff out of guys like Deion Jordan and Jordan Willis. I don't know. I feel like, yeah, they could use another edge rusher. Every team could, but I would prioritize O-line for sure. Anyway, interesting topic. And that means they're definitely going to get a DN to start. And that might be the right way to go about it because they have a formula. 4 first-round picks on the defensive line to work out.
Well, the only reason to really go that direction with the D end is the need to get Armstead inside, because with just Bosa there, that really kind of messes them up a little bit. They need to have somebody that's solid outside of him so he can swing down inside.
Also, a D end at 12 makes much more sense than a D tackle at 14. That makes sense to me. If they can get a stud pass rusher at 12 who rushes from the edge and has some production and skill, and he's not just a total athlete project, hey, great. That guy's going to be a baller. Okay.
Unfortunately, though, Gregory Rousseau is a athlete project baller that you said. So
Yeah.
You'd have to go that route. I think if they did go at 12.
Would he be kind of like a Bud Dupree who's really good, but then doesn't really put it together until year 4 or something like that? I don't know. Who's to say? All right, let's go on. Let's move on to Jerick McKinnon. What he did yesterday on Instagram was very interesting. I'm sure it wasn't premeditated. And if you don't know what it was, here's what happened. He went on Instagram Live with Deebo Samuel, and they were just having a fun time, laughing around, taking questions from people in the chat like we do. And one of the questions was, you coming back next year, Jerick? And Jerick, I guess, wasn't prepared for the question. And Deebo asked it. Jerick laughed and said, ha, F no. Except he didn't say F. And then he moved on. And my question to you, to me, it's like, wow, you're kind of gleeful. Like, you're happy to be leaving and you don't feel any type of, you don't feel compelled to like be graceful or respectful on the way out. It's like, good riddance. So where did that come from? And so the question is this some type of sign of a bigger issue on the 49ers, or is it just a sign of a bigger issue on Jerick McKinnon?
I think it's just time to move on. I don't see it as a big issue, really. I think it was just an uncomfortable situation with the amount of injuries that happened, and it didn't work out either way. But I think McKinnon, if he does get another opportunity, will enjoy the change of pace, and I think the 49ers ownership management will like a new blood of running backs.
I think what makes it interesting is it's such a glaring contrast from what I thought we knew about the 49ers and their locker room so far. Everybody wants to come to San Francisco. Kyle Shanahan's a player's coach. Everybody wants to be there. If you guys remember when McKinnon was out and all the other 49er running backs put those Jet McKinnon shirts on and took that photo, even though it didn't look like he was coming back the next year. It's like, wow, what a tight group. These guys really love the team, want to play together. And it was such a contrast from that. That aside, I mean, look at how he was treated the last few weeks of the season. He had 4 carries in his last 4 games, even though he was healthy, or as healthy as McKinnon can be. He had 1 carry his last 3 games. And so he probably felt like he was pushed aside to the bit, and he was pushed aside. And so I can see why someone like him would be excited to get a fresh start. So I'm not overly concerned about it, but it was that's interesting. And if I'm John Lynch or Kyle Shanahan, you can't be happy with that comment. You can't love that comment. You can understand it, but I don't think you're excited to hear that.
Yeah, it was a really interesting, to see that, because I think it does speak a little bit to a bigger issue. This is now year 4 with these guys, and they're starting to have some hard conversation with players that they brought in or players that they inherited and all these different types of things. And, we saw that, yesterday with McKinnon. We kind of saw it a little bit with Richard Sherman as he kind of quit towards the end of the season, probably because he knew he wasn't going to be coming back. I think we saw it a little bit with Jimmy Garoppolo to an extent in his end of the season press conference. So I think that this is something that's becoming, we're going to see more of moving forward. And it'll be really interesting to see how it plays out, because things could go really bad for the 49ers here if they're not able to, if they have to keep overspending for free agents, because that's really what they've had to do so far. It's not like everybody's jumping at the chance to come play for the 49ers, even when they were saying it was such a great place.
Yeah, back when everyone was saying, God, I want to be on the Niners, I want to be here. That was back when the Niners had a ton of cap space and hadn't really committed themselves financially to anyone yet. I mean, they committed themselves to Jimmy and Sherman and D Ford and Quan. There were like 4 guys. And now like the money's gone and you're either in or you're out. And I think that all of a sudden you're seeing everyone wants to go to the Jets. Is it because everyone likes Robert Saleh? Yeah. Is it also because the Jets have money to spend? Yeah. I don't know. So I think there's part of that. But I think, first of all, it was a really bad look for Jerick McKinnon. Like I'm not saying he's a bad person for doing it, but I would feel the same way he felt. You know, you want to move on. You want to be angry at your former employer, but don't say it. Like, they paid you a lot of money and you were a disappointment. You got hurt. They didn't wrong you. They stuck by you. If I were in that organization, I would have been telling them to cut you years ago. Like, move on, cut bait. They didn't. They gave you like $14 million. They let you rehab for years. They put you on the field when you were done. They cut young guys like Savon Ahmed, who should have been on the team instead of you. Like, have a little perspective. Don't say that on IG Live, but these guys are young and they made mistakes. And maybe I would have made a mistake at the same age, although he's not that young. Was he like 27, 28? Anyway, I thought it was a bad look. And maybe it is indicative of the fact that it's not the big happy family. But the thing is, they build it as a big happy family. It's not. That's a fairy tale. These things happen. They're behind closed doors and they leak out eventually. So it's just, that stuff was always a fairy tale. Anyway.
Really good point about the Jets having all the money now and all the cap space and how that's a factor in it being an attractive location.
Now everyone loves Robert Saleh. Yeah. Hey, Robert, can I be on your team? All right. Other than Fred Warner, who's going to get the big Mondo extension this offseason the way George Kittle got one last season, who do you think should be in line for the next one? So if Kittle got it in 2020, Warner's going to get it in 2021, theoretically. Who's the guy going to get the big extension in 2022 if there is a guy?
Yeah, if you look at the free agents that the 49ers have for 2022, there's not very many of them that are to really choose from. Their biggest 2 free agents are going to be Mike McGlinchey, who will probably be playing on his 5th-year option, and the other one would be Tarvarius Moore. So it doesn't really look like they have a free agent that's going to be coming up in 2022 that they're going to have to pay big money to. So those are the 2. I think beyond that you have Greenlaw, but I think they have him until 2023.
Yeah, I don't know that there is a guy that's going to be getting a Mondo extension, and it may not be 2022. Maybe it'll be a few years down the line. Is there any? I mean, it could be Nick Bosa. It could be Nick Bosa. Who do you think it's going to be?
I mean, Bosa, as soon as you're allowed to, as soon as you're able to, certainly. The name that I'm going to say is not a big Mondo extension. It's not your Fred Warner size contract, but I'm just going to throw this out there. I can't wait until Daniel Brunskill gets extended because this guy has been so freaking important to this team over the last couple of years. He gets zero credit. Yeah. And just like Mav said earlier, because he can play all these different positions, now when you go into the draft, if there's a really good guard that you like and a really good center, it allows you to maneuver and do so many things during the draft, on game day. I mean, this guy has been so pivotal to the 49ers' success the last 2 years, including getting to the Super Bowl last year. I don't know that they would have got to the Super Bowl without Daniel Brunskill. He handles Aaron Donald more than adequately. So, again, it's not going to be a massive Fred Warner type contract, but I want to see this guy finally get paid.
I'd say Greenlaw would be my number 1 pick just because I think after the 2022 season, he'd be a free agent if my math serves me right. And just if they're doing that route of signing before his last season, then that'd be the way to go. But the other guy is lock up Jeff Wilson Jr., not to a crazy running back contract. You don't want to pay running backs too much, but if you could get him similar to what Mostert's contract was 2 years ago, I think that'd be a good extension.
Yeah, I think I'm not sure that there is a guy that's going to get the big extension the way Kittle and Warner did. I mean, is going to. Warner's worth it because he's the leader of the team, and even at the highest paid middle linebacker in the league, he's not killing your salary cap structure. I wonder if the Niners regret giving George Kittle all that money. They knew that he played a very physical position. They knew that he missed games, and now he missed 8. I think maybe the Niners need to be a little bit more reluctant and hesitant and reticent to give out these Mondo extensions to players they like just because they're part of the family, because they developed them. Like, for example, Deebo Samuel. Deebo Samuel could have a great year next year. And then the Niners say, well, we got to extend him. Do you have to extend him? I mean, he's got an injury history. He's a receiver. You have a good track record drafting receivers. Why don't you trade him and draft 2 more? That's the way I mean, like, do you really want to extend Nick Bosa and give him $32 million a year or whatever it's going to cost? Or do you want to trade him? I think maybe the Niners need to start looking like that. And there's only so many guys you can give the 5-year, $120 million extension to before you're done. Your quarterback, maybe your middle linebacker, maybe one more guy. I don't know. I think maybe you got to just move on. It's what the Steelers do. They never fall in love with their wide receivers. Juju Smith-Schuster is going to leave, and they have plenty of guys to replace him, and they just keep churning and drafting. I don't know. But I'm a Moneyball kind of guy. Like I don't root for these guys. You know, I don't care. I really don't. I know you guys like Debo. He's got a nice name. He's fun. But honestly, get another one.
And he shouldn't be somebody that you're going to be giving really big money to. He's not a number 1 receiver. He's a good playmaker, but he's not a number 1 guy. But he, another name that's coming up, and you mentioned Grant is Nick Bosa, but the 49ers have him under contract they own his rights through 2023 if they decide to go, with the 5th-year option. Right. So if they're going to make a move with Bosa, it's going to be probably, what would that be, at the end of the 2022 season, going into 2023, like what they did with that would be about the right time. That's when I would do it.
I mean, you want to get him every single snap you could on that rookie wage scale, but after that, I'd like to at least, answer calls, see what's available, see what I could get. If you get 3 first-round, I don't know.
Well, I think they even have an extra year with Bosa unless he doesn't want to play on the franchise tag because, I mean, assuming he keeps to the trajectory he had in his rookie season, he would probably reset the market at defensive end when he is a free agent. So franchising him would be a bargain in that sense because isn't it an average of the top 5 salaries?
Yes.
So that would help it out. And, I mean, I think edge rusher, if you have one of Nick Bosa's caliber, I think that's one position you definitely have to sign. But in terms of next, I don't think he is the next guy to get that extension.
Like, just think about it, how the Patriots do it. Like, the Patriots, for all those years that they had Tom Brady, they paid Brady, and they paid, like, one dude on defense who was the leader, and it was usually Devin McCourty or Dante Hightower, a safety and a middle linebacker. They're not that expensive. You keep Brady. Everyone else is gone. Everyone else, you keep them for their rookie deal, and you trade them. Like, Nick Bosa would not get a second contract from the Patriots if they were paying Brady. He was, hey, thank you very much. Now we're trading you to the Arizona Cardinals. That's what they did with Chandler Jones. It's like, it's a business. There's a salary cap. You can't get too emotional and sentimental. We love you, Debo. We love you, Nick Bosa. Now you're gone. That's how the Patriots would do it. And I think that's basically how you got to do it unless you have a quarterback who's really cheap and on a rookie deal himself, and you can keep churning that position. That's tough. So move on.
I'm sure the Patriots players are going on family vacations with their head coach either. It's a very, very different culture.
It really is. And, to me, I think Shanahan emulates Bill Belichick, only to a degree, though, because there's all these other things that he does that Belichick wouldn't do. He gets very close to players and becomes their friends, and then they end up staying on the team 4 years too long, like Trent Taylor and CJ Beathard. That's a mistake. Belichick wouldn't do that. Anyway, most important assistant coach the Niners didn't lose this offseason because they lost a bunch of them. We've talked about the impact, what it's going to be that they didn't lose. What it means that they lost LaFleur, what it means that they lost John Benton, all these guys. Well, who did they not lose? And why is that important? Which guy? I got a name. I can start.
I think am I up?
Sure.
Yeah, I think D'Amico Ryans, because if they didn't have their defensive coordinator, the guy they felt comfortable at defensive coordinator, I think that would have been a big loss. I think he helps Fred Warner and Dre Greenlaw, and being able to retain him as the defensive coordinator, I think is big for this defense's future.
Bobby Turner's still on staff, right?
Ooh, you took my name. Isn't
that indicative? The fact that I had to ask, doesn't that speak to how underrated this guy is and nobody talks about
That's
it?
what I'm saying. I mean, he's a superstar.
Absolutely. Tell me a 49er running back who's looked terrible in this system the last couple of years. And yeah, give a little bit of credit to Shanahan for that. But Bobby Turner behind the scenes, I mean, well before his time on the 49ers, established himself as definitely the best running back coach in the league. Remember, he made Tom Rathman expendable. And arguably one of the best assistant coaches in the entire league. And nobody's talking about the guy.
Yeah. Yes, absolutely. He developed Terrell Davis. I mean, dozens of running backs. He's such an asset. Jack.
There's a couple of really good ones that are still left, but I'm going to go with Chris Kosarek just because of what he can do with the defensive line. And if you look at what he was able to do this year, it's similar to Bobby Turner, what he was able to do this year with a banged up defensive line. And, their pressure numbers weren't as good as they've been in the past, but he was able to really get a lot out of Kerry Hyder. He's probably going to make Hyder a ton of money this year in free agency. And, he's gotten Kevin Givens to become a player that is a really strong rotational piece in the middle of that defensive line. So that would be the guy that I would go with.
Great names. I'm going to list two more just for the sake of getting their names out there because they deserve it. First, the running game coordinator, Mike McDaniel, who got promoted to offensive coordinator. He's a very bright coach. And if they had lost him and Mike LaFleur, then Kyle Shanahan would basically have to become a full-time offensive coordinator and do way too much work or hire someone else, like make Rich Scangarello the offense. I mean, it would be bad. I feel like Shanahan trusts this guy, and he doesn't have LaFleur anymore, but he does have McDaniel. He can at least delegate and be a head coach. So that's good. And then also the assistant head coach / tight ends coach, John Embry, he might be just as good as Bobby Turner or a notch below. He developed George Kittle. He developed Ross Dwelly. He's going to develop Charlie Werner. Guy's really, really, really good. Been a head coach. I'm sure he helps Kyle Shanahan. I mean, we talk sometimes that Kyle Shanahan needs like an older, wise guy to tell him what. That's John Embry. He's very good at what he does, and another guy who gets zero credit. It's clutch that they kept him. I believe his son is the running back coach for the Jets. He's now followed Saleh to the Jets, and he was a quality control coach with the Niners. So the Niners could have lost him too, but they kept him. That's important. Anyway, who will be the 49ers breakout performer of 2021? It was Kittle in 19. It was Warner in 2020. Well, it was Kittle in 18, wasn't it? It was Kittle in 18. It was Warner in 2020. Who will be the guy in 2021?
I'm going to go with Brandon Ayuk. I'm going to go with Ayuk because I think the 49ers are going to be a little bit more improved. Definitely going to be improved at the quarterback position, which is going to allow him to be a bigger playmaker in their offense. He had a pretty darn good season this year, considering he missed a couple of games and he was playing with the backup quarterbacks for the majority of the season. So I really have a lot of faith that he's going to be much better, much improved in his second year in this, especially if he's able to get through a full off season as well.
Yeah, I like Jack's answer. It's tough to argue with that, but I'm going to go with Kinlaw. I think let's assume Nick Bosa is going to be healthy on the end. Let's assume the 49ers get someone serviceable at D end. You put Armstead in the middle with Kinlaw, and I know it's tough to say a lot of good things about Armstead right now after the season that he had, but if he can focus on being back on the interior with two legitimate pass rushers on the end, that's a really good recipe for success for a young defensive tackle to be in between Armstead and Bosa on the line. And he did splash and he did make some he could be a little more consistent last year, but he splashed and showed that he has a lot of potential and a really high ceiling. So that would be the guy I'd pick.
Yeah, I think when they drafted him, they wanted him to be like the fourth pass rush threat on the line and thought he'd be good at that. And he didn't get to be that last year. Maybe he could be that this year. Good call. Maverick.
I always go Jeff Wilson Jr. on every question, so why change it? But I think in a bigger role, in a more consistent 16-game role, I think he would do really well in Kyle's offense. I think he's a very good pass catcher out of the backfield. I think that's something we didn't really see before the last two seasons, and now we know he's a decent pass catcher. He's a good runner. I know there's some problems with fumbling, but it's really just two spurts: the beginning of his career and then that 2-week span this year. And other than that, he has no other fumbles. So I think Wilson would be a good option for breakout.
That's a great option. You could almost argue that he broke out this year. He was just terrific this year. Other guys who might break out next year: Daniel Brunskill, Ross Dwelly. But I'm going to pick Deebo Samuel. And the reason I feel like you could go with Deebo or Ayuk. And Ayuk's a good choice because he's better than Deebo and he's in better shape, better athlete. But I'm just going to go like real deep not conspiracy, but I'm going to real project here. I've seen players have sophomore slumps, especially guys who had a ton of praise their rookie year. They're 22, they're 23. They think it's easy. They go into the offseason and they just don't do that well. And they come back and it's like, I'm not saying Ayuk can have a sophomore slump. I'm just saying that Deebo Samuel's coming off a very disappointing year. He's getting 1 year closer to that second contract. He's got to get it together. He's got to have his breakout year, and he's running out of time. He's basically got 2 years to do it. This year would be good, and I think he's basically going to have excellent offseason. He's going to stay healthy for 1 year and just tear it up. I think he's just going to be fantastic next year. Deebo Samuel. We'll see. Or he'll pull his hamstring in May and never really get it going. One piece of advice for Kyle Shanahan this offseason. We could go in a lot of different directions with this.
If he's really the guy that gets blamed or credited for every draft pick, how about just draft the best player available? Don't reach on a guy. I think if there's a position, as we've seen, positions that might not be perceived as needs at the time of the draft, like tackle, could end up being needs by November. So best player available that fits that system, I think would be my advice.
Go on.
I'd say be humble and help your team be humble. I mean, I cringe going back. I watched the Chiefs 49ers Super Bowl for the first time since the game recently. And, after that interception was a Greenlaw late in the game when everybody thought the 49ers were going to win. I'll admit, I thought the 49ers were going to win. I thought the game was 90% done at that point, even though they were up against the Chiefs. And the players look so foolish looking back now, standing up against the camera in the end zone, posing and doing, the selfie and all that stuff. And you look back now and you say, man, that was the turning point in the game when they got cocky, overconfident, and thought they won. And I saw things like that happen this year in games this year. We're late in the game. They celebrated. They over-celebrated too soon. And I'd like to see something done about that and have the players be a little bit more humble. And let's not celebrate until the game's over, fellas.
That's a good answer. I like these so far.
That's a good one. I'm going to go with the easy one. I'm going to say, Kyle, you got to get your quarterback. You got to get you got to get the guy because you haven't had one unless you really believe in Jimmy Garoppolo. You need to get a quarterback and you need to get somebody that you're going to be able to build around because, you had the one Super Bowl season this year was down. If you continue to have down seasons, you're not going to be here much longer than probably the next 2 years. So find yourself a quarterback that you can build around.
Right now, what he has is excuses. I don't have my quarterback. Well, okay, you're entering year 5. It's about time. Find someone, and we'll see if he's the right guy or not. That's great advice. My advice would be a little bit smaller in scope, but just as important. Don't sign a freaking running back. Don't sign a freaking running back. Don't do the Jerick McKinnon thing again. Don't do the Tevin. I'm serious, it's not funny. Don't do the Tevin Coleman thing again. Don't do the Joe Williams thing again. You just sign 2 or 3 guys after the draft every year and let Bobby Turner do his thing. It worked for your dad. It works for you. I still don't understand why you signed Jerick McKinnon. Everyone in the world could have told you that was a bad idea. You went ahead with it anyway. Don't do it again. Don't sign a running back. That's easy. I think Kyle can do that. I think Kyle can execute that plan. Don't sign a freaking running back, Kyle. Jeez. I don't know does anyone disagree with that? Kyle. Everyone's telling you, man. You got Bobby Turner. Don't do it. Don't be like, oh, there's this one scat back on Minnesota who I think deserves third. Nope, he doesn't. He doesn't.
He's going to trade back for Najee Harris now.
He really is. He really is. Oh, my God. Okay, the biggest mistake the Niners made in 2020. You might have to think about this one because there were some doozies. But what was the biggest mistake the Niners made in 2020?
The biggest mistake the 49ers made in 2020 is trading DeForest Buckner. That was their biggest one. And I know that they got people like to talk about how they got Ayuk out of that, but they could have re-signed Buckner, and I think that would have helped them with their pass rush, which would have helped them out overall. That's my biggest one. And the fact that they didn't get a whole lot in return for him. You've pointed that out a few times. I think they got the 13th pick for a defensive tackle that's the second best in the game. So that's where I would say they made their biggest mistake.
Yeah, if the Jets got 2 firsts for a box safety, how could the Niners not get 2 firsts for the second best defense? I don't get it. Anyway, Tony.
Mine, I would say, is kind of a string of mistakes. I mean, all right, the 49ers had health issues this year. How much do we chalk that up to bad luck? How much do we chalk that up to the training staff? How much do we chalk that up to players being put back on the field a little bit too soon? I'm going to put in that pie percentage of fault, I'm going to put that last piece as part of it, right? I think there were guys, I mean, you could even say it with Garoppolo that he may have been brought back too soon. There were guys that were brought back too soon. Debo gets on the field and then he's hurt again and things like that. I'd like to see a better handling of 49ers injuries, particularly when guys are already hurt.
Oh, there's been another setback. Oh, I don't want to hear that word anymore. You're right. Maverick.
I would go with the Buckner thing as well, but just to make it a little different, how about just the draft of going McKivitz and being comfortable with him as your offensive line addition? Michael Onwenu, who was with New England this year, I think was an outstanding rookie and was probably a top 6 rookie this season. And he would have provided depth at both right tackle and right guard, and that would have helped a lot. And he was available when they picked McKivitz.
Yeah. Look, to me, not taking Tristan Wirfs, who's right now the best right tackle in the league, and taking a 2-down project that you knew wasn't much of a pass rusher, that's a doozy. Also trading Buckner, I mean, that blew my mind from the minute they did it. But as bad of a deal as that was, and how they didn't get enough in return, the defense still ranked top 5. If that was Robert Saleh's call and he said I can still have a great defense without him, he was pretty much right. It would have been even more dominant if Nick Bosa had stayed healthy. So to me, the biggest mistake the Niners made in 2020 was not signing Tom Brady. I don't care how bad the Niners offensive line is. He doesn't get hurt. His left tackle in Tampa is atrocious. Right now, he's worse than Mike McGlinchey. That Donovan Smith guy is awful. If the Niners had Tom Brady, he would have played 16 games. They would have won 10 at least. And I think they'd be in the NFC Championship game right now, even without Buckner, even without Bosa. I do. There's no way to prove it, but I feel very strongly that the Niners missed out on an opportunity to contend this year. And not just that. Do you understand how much money Jed York would have made in revenue this year if they had Tom Brady? The decision not to sign him cost them wins, but also cost them millions and millions and millions of dollars. I mean, Jimmy Garoppolo jerseys right now are like 99% off at Finish Line and Macy's. Like you get that for like $350. Tom Brady, I mean, I'm just saying. So that was a big one, and they're going to regret it unless they get Deshaun Watson or Matthew Stafford this year.
How about if, like, wasn't there a report that Nick Mullins was getting second or third round picks offered or something like that?
We don't know if it was a second or third. We just know that there was an offer.
Yeah, if there was offers, just anything, if you're able to trade your quarterback, if they were truly comfortable with Jimmy Garoppolo at quarterback and not needing to sign Tom Brady, why was it necessary to keep a backup quarterback where if he goes down, you're in trouble anyways? If they could have got a third round pick for their backup quarterback, I don't know why you don't jump at that.
Trade one or the other. Trade Jimmy, trade Mullins. Both of them were at an all-time high in value. You kept both and tanked both of their values. Very interesting. Very interesting. Good call. All right, now let's go positive. What is the smartest thing the Niners did in 2020? They're a smart organization. It couldn't have all been bad. They had some bad luck. Right? Who starts?
Oh, am I starting? Okay.
Yeah.
I would say the smartest thing they did was trading Quan Alexander and getting rid of that contract and letting it be Dre Greenlaw and Fred Warner as the two linebackers. There's probably something smarter, but that's just the first thing that came to my mind is moving on from that mistake. And although it's unfortunate Quan Alexander got hurt, I think they got out of that salary, and being able to go Greenlaw and Warner is huge.
Yeah, I'm going to go with bringing back Jason Verrett. I mean, I'll admit it. When they did that, I kind of rolled my eyes. I didn't have confidence that Verrett was going to be healthy again and that he was going to look great on the field. And they proved me wrong. They proved a lot of people wrong with that move. Although it could have been smarter. 2-year contract would have been nice if they had that much confidence in him. But that would be tough to expect them to do that given his injury history. But that was a brilliant move, bringing him back, and it paid off.
Jack.
Yeah, that was the one that I was going to go with right there was Verrett. I'd actually said that a couple weeks ago.
Me too. Not a lot of smart things the Niners did in 2020. You really have to think it through. Like, damn, nope, that wasn't smart. No, that wasn't the best move.
Yeah.
Trading up for Ayuk?
Well, yeah, they tried trading up for Ayuk. I would say I don't know if it's the best thing they did in 2020, but I'd say the fact that they had Robert Saleh in 2020 was a huge one, because now they get a third round draft pick for him getting his head coaching job, which they wouldn't have got in years past. So there's that route. Kerry Hyder was a heck of a signing, but nobody expected anything out of him. But that was a good one.
That was terrific. Bringing in that Mike Rutenberg guy as the defensive pass game coordinator, he was terrific. The defense got even better with him. I thought losing Joe Woods would be a big deal. They got better without Joe Woods, and Joe Woods is really good. But Jason Verrett, keeping the faith there was amazing. After he gave up that long catch against Pittsburgh in 2019, I thought his career was over. And the Niners were very patient. It paid off. Maybe it'll pay off with Jalen Hurd. Who knows? But yeah, we don't really have the best answer. I guess Ferret. It's Ferret in a landslide with Kerry Hyder as a number 2. Yeah. Well, maybe next year they'll make better decisions. Brandon Ayuk was a good pick. I mean, it was a pretty good pick.
Yeah.
The Niners player with the what?
Who was Mav's guy again?
Who'd you say?
Who did you say, Mav?
Trading Quan Alexander.
Yeah, that was a good one too.
That was really good.
Did we lose
Tony? Tony is definitely frozen right now. Should we kick Tony out and hope he comes back, or should we just let him be? Leave him in suspended animation. Tony, we're going to see you in a minute. All right, he'll be back. All right, the Niners player with the most to prove in 2021. You can take this any direction you want.
Yeah, I'm going to say the most approved in 2021 is going to be Nick Bosa and his ability to come back and be healthy. Because if he's not healthy, that's going to be a huge blow to that defense, especially with the changes from solid to Ryans, and kind of what they went through this year. And they're probably not going to be able to bring Hyder back. So really, they're really needing him to come back and prove that he's the same guy he was in 2019.
Maverick, about you.
Most to prove, I guess, Mike McGlinchey, that he's a starting caliber right tackle. He's in a big year with that option coming up. I think he needs to have a big year, and Eric Armstead too. Like, you need to have bounce back seasons, and you need to prove that you're worthy of the investments of the team. And if they can, the narrative around them will change. We saw what happened with Jimmy Ward. Jimmy Ward's first contract with the Niners wasn't great, and he had that 1-year fix-it deal, and then he turned it on, and now he's probably the third best player on the defense, maybe the fourth, and you can turn it around easy. It's just you have to actually turn it around.
Okay, well, you got to name the biggest guy, Jimmy Garoppolo. That guy has a lot to prove. I mean, he's the highest paid player on the team. He played 3 full games last season. He left another 2 at halftime and a third after the third quarter. He's got a lot to prove, but I actually don't think he's going to be on the team next year. They're saying he is, but I think they're going to find an exit route, and he's going to have something to prove on another team. That's my bold prediction. So if it's not him, Bosa's a great pick. Debo would be a great pick, but to me, it's George Kittle, because George Kittle missed 8 games this year. He missed 2 games the year before that. He's getting older. I mean, he's 27 or about to be 28. He's getting up there, and he gets paid wide receiver money. He needs to stay on the field and produce like a wide receiver. I said he deserved the money. He needs to prove it now. If he's going to be this guy who's now in and out of the lineup and banged up, then the Niners got screwed. I'm sorry, I love you, George, but you need to stay healthy. You have a lot to prove. You play a very physical style of football, and I think a lot of people are kind of expecting your body to start to break down. So prove that it won't. Prove that you have longevity and that you weren't just a freak from 24 to 27. George.
Yeah, that's a really good one, because everybody compares him to Travis Kelce, and Kelsey's just an Iron Man in comparison. That's right. Okay, we got 2 more, and these are 2 juicy ones. We could talk about them as much as you like. Let's talk to Deshaun. It's a very interesting, delicate situation in Houston. The owner has said racist stuff in the past. The owner's brother. They hired this Luke Easterby guy who seems to be a religious nut. I wouldn't want to play for the Texans, and I understand where Deshaun Watson's coming from. That being said, he doesn't seem to have actually requested a trade yet, but what he does is go on social media every couple of days and say how mad he is or upset or whatever. And all I'm asking you is, would you call that whining? Would you call that unprofessional? And if you were the 49ers, would it turn you off? Because you know what? Say what you want about Jimmy Garoppolo. He wouldn't do that. I don't think any quarterback would do that other than this. I mean, Mahomes, I can't think of a quarterback who would do the I'm really unhappy in Houston tweet every day, basically. Sorry. Answer the question. I just think it's a different situation, and it's I think you had mentioned this before, and it makes sense. It's kind of like the NBA scenario. I want out. He's kind of following the same route that Harden had done, and those kind of things. It doesn't really bother me, especially nowadays. These guys are on social media so much. You just kind of has a roll off your back. And you hope that when you bring him in and you're able to put a team around him, you're not going to see that kind of stuff because he will become the face of your franchise. So that's what really makes it a hard deal for Houston.
I think another reason is we haven't really seen a scenario like this where it's such a young quarterback that has, at least for the first year, a pretty flexible contract, and then it gets bigger after that. That's at the peak of his career and is available in this sense. We were talking a couple weeks ago, Jay Cutler is really the only other quarterback that was like that. But Deshaun Watson is much better than Jay Cutler ever was, so that makes it different. I've been raised with social media as a big thing for most of my life. So the social media complaining doesn't really bother me that much. That might just be because of my age, but I think it would drastically change if he was brought over to a much more comfortable situation than what Houston is. Who knows? They haven't hired a head coach as of this moment. So what if it's Bieniemy? What if he ends up getting his way? Then everything changes. What if it's another coach he's interested in? We don't know, but I think Deshaun has handled it in a unique way, but I don't think the Niners would be turned off by it.
They might be. Let me make the case for why they might be. A running back can tweet like this. A tight end can tweet like this. A wide receiver can tweet. It's no problem. You want to be upset and you want to air it out, fine. The thing about being a franchise quarterback in the NFL, the dude who's making $40 million a year, is you're really expected to carry yourself like a 50-year-old CEO. You're not 25, even though you are. You're paid to be the face of the franchise and act like you're a C-level employee. And that means, not tweeting like this. He's coming across like a young man who hates his boss at work and goes home and tweets about it. Like, no, dude, go tell the boss or quit. Don't do this. Don't go home and whine idly. Do something. Take an action. Go and tell the Texans, trade me. I officially request a trade, and do it in private, or don't and work it out behind closed doors. The whole going on Twitter and being like, hey, I'm still unhappy. To me, it's like if my 15-year-old son was handling things like that, I'd be like, no, we're not going to whine on social media. You got a problem with someone? Let's go talk to their face. Let's end this. You know what I'm saying? That's the way I look at it. It's like, come on, man. Like, it looks immature.
Do we know for sure, though, that he hasn't tried the silent route and they just brushed it off multiple times? It could just be he's exhausted his – this is also special.
Good question. I'm just saying it would take his agent 30 seconds to call up Adam Schefter and say, Adam, we have officially requested a trade from Houston. Tell him.
Yeah.
I don't think it's that hard. Eli Manning didn't want to play for the Chargers. He got his ass out of San Diego and went where he wanted to go. Deshaun can do that. But to me, maybe it's a generational thing. It's like, man, just request a trade already, dude. Just do it. What are you waiting for? Stop whining. It's whining to me, but maybe I'm a whiner deep down at heart too. And it's just, it's like,
I'm going to start complaining about you on Twitter all the time now.
There you go. That's fair. Okay. Final question. Everyone's talking about Deshaun Watson. Should the Niners trade for Deshaun? Yeah, he's great. It's very expensive. The Texans may not even really want to do business with the Niners, considering they have the 12th pick and other teams have higher picks. It may not be that realistic. A more realistic scenario, maybe Matthew Stafford in Detroit, considering they're talking about rebuilding. He's very expensive for them, but would be $13 million a year cheaper for the 49ers. Do you think the Niners should trade for Matthew Stafford? Why or why not?
If you're asking me, if the question was, am I going to trade for Deshaun Watson or Matt Stafford, I'm definitely going to say that I'm going to trade for Deshaun Watson, because that's a younger player that you're going to have under contract for a longer period of time.
Okay.
It gives you a little bit more flexibility with his salary and what you can do with the cap with his contract and those kind of things. Plus, if you look at the two, I think you can correct me if I'm wrong, but I think Stafford is in the 20 to 23 for his first 2 years, which gives him right about $43 million over the first 2 years of his deal.
Yes.
That he'd be with the 49ers.
Yes.
Watson's going to be pretty close to that same number, because the first year is 10.5 and then it's 35. So the numbers are pretty close really over the course of the 2 years. But Watson gives you a much better, much more cap flexibility, at least in year one.
Yes.
Plus the other reason is I'm not so hot on trading away a one for a guy that's 33. I think he's going to be, he's kind of on the backside of his career. Who might not be here beyond a couple of years, because he does have some injury history as well.
Yeah, he's going to be 33. I just turned 33, and let me tell you, it's terrible.
Well, you look like it. You look like
thanks, man.
but if I'm going to do that, I'm going to go with the younger guy over the older guy. I'm not really high on giving away 1 or 2 first-round picks for him, considering he's only got 2 years left on his deal.
That's a good point.
And his age. So
that's a good point. Maverick.
I've been on the side of I think Stafford would be a great addition to the offense, but I just don't think the Lions will trade him unless they get a really good offer, because like we've been saying, unless they get that chance to get Justin Fields, which they do have the luxury of, they can wait until after the draft to make a decision on Stafford. If they are really playing that long game with Dan Campbell, then they can wait for the 2022 draft to get that pick instead and see how the draft plays out if they can get Wilson or Fields. But I think they should stick with Stafford at least for a year or two. Detroit thought they had a chance to make the playoffs this season with the roster they had, and obviously they didn't. They have to re-sign a couple guys, but if Dan Campbell thinks they can win within the next 2 years, it'd be Stafford or Fields or Wilson is the way to go. So they can't get one of those 2 guys. Stafford's the next best option. So they better get 2 first-round picks or a first and a second for Stafford, in my opinion.
Right. It's the same thing with Watson. Let's say this team wants to move off their quarterback. They want to move off Watson. They want to move off Stafford. Okay, that's drastic, but then why are you calling up the team with the 12th pick in the draft? Why is the team, why are the Niners the one that you do business with? Because they can't help you replace that guy. Carolina can, Atlanta can, Washington can, the Niners can. So that makes sense to me. But coming back to what Jack said, if it was down to the Watson or Stafford, and the Niners can get either one, is just who they wanted to go for, I would go for Stafford. And Jack made a great case for Watson. Let me make the case for Stafford. First of all, the trade would cost fewer picks. Instead of 3 firsts, 3 seconds, whatever, it would be like 1 first, 1 second, whatever. So there's that. Also, while Watson would be cheaper in 2021, he'd be very cheap in 2021. Stafford wouldn't be super expensive. He'd be at $20 million, which would be like 11% of the cap. It's high, but not a deal breaker. And then the next year, he would be about 11% of the cap again, because the cap would go up and he'd go up to $23 million. He again would be expensive, but not a deal breaker, as opposed to Watson, who goes into astronomical stratosphere level in 2022, a level that no one's ever won a Super Bowl at. Maybe he can. Someone's going to do it eventually. Maybe it's him. So I like the idea of having the more mid-level price as opposed to cheap, way expensive. And then he's a free agent after 2 years. You can move on. You could re-sign him. He might be affordable. I don't know. I like that. But Maverick makes it feel like neither one's really going to happen. And, if you trade a first and a second for this guy, how do you fix your offensive line? It's not like Stafford hasn't had injuries the last few years. He gets hurt too. So why is he going to survive behind this offensive line all of a sudden? Why? Maybe he won't.
I'd love to see Stafford with a good running game, though, because he hasn't really had that in his career. I think their first 100-yard rusher in the last 6 years happened last season. They haven't had 100. They haven't had a good running back situation. So it'd be interesting to see what Stafford could do in that scenario. But like I said, I think it'll take picks for both, and it just depends on who Shanahan and Lynch are more interested in, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I like Stafford too. I just, and you made a good, your deal is pretty right on $2,000. I think that makes a lot of sense. I'm just not really big. I'm not as worried about the picks kind of after, taking a look at some of the history as much, but on the Watson side, but darn, watching Stafford and what he could do in this offense with the weapons that they have right now, that would be a lot of fun.
The run game's an interesting point. To me, like what the Shanahan's legacy in the NFL is helping quarterbacks like Stafford, like Elway, guys who are very talented, but are stuck in these terrible organizations that don't give them the full complement of a team. And the Shanahan's like, all right. I know everyone wants you to be a great quarterback. We're going to give you the running game. You'll be even better. That's what they do. So they could really help Stafford the way Mike helped Elway. I don't know if he'll get Stafford, but I mean, he's a much more physically gifted quarterback than Matt Ryan ever was. It would be very interesting to see what those two could do together. I'd be curious, but again, it's not going to happen. Why would the Lions really want to trade him here? If they had options, I'm sure more than just the Niners would want Stafford if he was available. I'm sure a lot of teams would want him. And he's interesting. Go ahead. It's the 49ers.
It's the 49ers. Everybody wants to play with the 49ers.
That's true.
Everybody wants to give the 49ers their Super Bowls,
Right. And all these players grew up watching Joe Montana in 1984, even though they were born in 1993. They're all Joe Montana fans and Steve Young fans. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I think we're just going to have to get used to the idea of Kyle Trask being the backup quarterback behind Andy Dalton next year. It's going to be really exciting stuff, guys. Really exciting stuff. Try to hide contain your excitement and make it to the offseason. Guys, this was a good show. We lost Tony. He didn't even come back. I don't know what happened. I hope he's okay. Should we call him? We should probably call. I'll give him a call. See what he's okay.
He's okay. He's okay. He says his phone died.
That's what I thought. The phone died. All right. Okay. Well, thanks for watching, everyone. We got a bunch of people in here. Appreciate it. We'll be back tomorrow with more discussion and trivia. The new Friday feature courtesy of Maverick, which is a lot of fun. So we'll see you tomorrow.